That right there was a VCT rattling noise on a cold startup. Very common on these 3.5 Ecoboost engines for the cam phasers to rattle before they build oil pressure, and then the noise kind of goes away. I'm not going to be explaining or digging into why they fail or make that noise. There's plenty of good videos out there explaining all of that. The sole purpose of this video is to show you my process in going about this job. There's plenty of ways. There's raising the cab up, hanging over the front clip. I like removing the whole front clip, and then I have access to the whole front engine. So I already raised the vehicle up. I disconnected the transmission bracket, drained the oil, disconnected the transmission cooler lines that go to the radiator, drained the coolant, and then recovered my AC system. So let's go ahead and begin. So I got most of my tools here to at least start the job. You know, a couple of 10 mils, 13s, 7, 8 mils. And our first step in removing the front clip is going to be removing this trim piece for the headlight. So there's going to be two 7mm bolts right here. And then let's give this like a nice firm pull, just so that is disconnected from this trim piece right here. So once that's all loosened up, we got a clip that's right here that we'll remove. Place that over there, and this piece should come right out. This is the same process for the other side, so let me go do that real quick, and then we'll go ahead and remove this grill piece. All right, the next step would be removing this front grill before we can remove the headlights. So let's go ahead and remove our air duct. Let's go into the air box. There is a little screw back here. It's an 8mm screw. It's actually broken off the actual piece that secures it. So we're just going to go ahead and just pop these little clips off. Okay, once we got these two clips off, we can go ahead and remove our air duct and set it to the side. We could go ahead and start popping all these little push pins out from the top for this little trim piece. Once we got all of our push pins removed, this piece should just come right off, and now we can go ahead and move on to the next step. Let's go ahead and remove this clip that's on this harness. We could disconnect our connectors here and kind of stick them out the way. And now we can go ahead and remove this deflector. On both sides. Looks good. Last one. Take our 10 mil. And then these bottom screws are actually 8s. And this whole piece, once you got your fasteners on top and on the side all disconnected, this piece should just come right off. So let's move on to the headlight. There's going to be a whole bunch of these little bolts right here that are attached to this bracket. There's one 8mm right here, and that's a screw, and the rest are 10s. And then there's a hitting 10 behind this little fender flare. So once you got all your fasteners for this bottom bracket, there's going to be a clip back here that you need to remove. And then once that is removed, you get some pliers, and there's like a little clip in here that you squeeze, and this whole piece should kind of be loose. Once you got this bottom bracket all loosened up, you can go ahead and remove this one 10 mil, two 10 mils on top, and this should be loose. So you got all your fasteners out, and this bottom bracket should come right out. There are some clips that clip into here that you kind of just pry and then lift this bracket out. Once that bracket's out, then you have all the room to remove this headlight. And I like to just twist the bulbs out. There's one that you have to disconnect from the connector, which is this one. And then this one I just twist out with the bulb. And the headlight's out. Let's remove this air deflector from the actual radiator. So when we remove this kind of just stays out the way. We can remove our harness and push that out the way. And now that harness is ready to go through the clip. When we remove it, we're going to remove our hood latch cable. So I remove it. I get some needle nose and I just kind of squeeze this clip in just so I can guide the cable out. And then once the cable is removed, I put this back on. And now we can guide our cable out from the front. We can get our AC lines disconnected and out of the way. So let's go ahead and remove our coolant reservoir. You can just disconnect this hose. That one's off. Now at the bottom of this reservoir, you got this hose that you can just remove this retaining clip, and then this hose should just come right off. There's two 10 mils on top, and our reservoir is removed. I went ahead and disconnected our upper radiator hose from the radiator, and then also our lower radiator hose that sits right here. The lower radiator hose is a lot more difficult to remove, just as it gets stuck on there and you have to really shake it and pull hard to remove it from the radiator. But once you got it off, it's pretty simple. It's just a clip holding it. And now there are some connectors back here. Like this harness connects to, like, clips on that is holding it onto the radiator, and then there are some pins on the radiator fans and the connectors, but it's kind of a tight spot, and since I'm removing this anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start removing the mounting bolts, pull it forward to give me enough room to get to those areas, and we'll go from there. Now once we got our 6 bolts removed, kind of lift up on it and I kind of tilt it back. So once you got your radiator support tilting this way, so it's loose right now, this gives you enough access to the back to go ahead and remove your radiator fan connectors and all the wire harness clips that are mounted on the fan, and then this whole thing should just come right out. So all of that, you know, removing the grill, the headlights, the whole radiator support, the front clip of the vehicle, took about like 30 minutes, and that was with me kind of going slow. So I like doing it this way because it's not a lot of work to get to this point,
and plus you get access to the whole front of the engine. You know, look at all these hoses, and trying to hang over the top, trying to disconnect all those, man, my back would just be aching after I'd be doing this job. So I like doing it this way. I set up some mats right here, and so I can sit down and then I can work on the engine part. So let's go ahead and remove all of these hoses and everything so we can get access to the engine. We're working on our charge pipes for both our turbos. So there's going to be both the right side and left side charge pipes connecting to the intercooler. There's 7mm hose clamps that I loosen with my ratchet. But before I do anything with the charge pipes, my little tip in removing these are grabbing some silicone and spraying these joints where the charge pipes and the intake pipes mount to the valve cover. Those things can be really stubborn, and you can break those little plastic tabs that go into that bracket. So what I like to do is just really lubricate those rubber pieces that those plastic pieces are in there, and I'll let it soak in there for a little bit, and then I go around it with some lube. So this side is going to be a little bit more difficult to get to. And then once those are all lubed up, and then I'll go ahead and go around with some Siliglide around the rubber pieces, and it makes removing those charge pipes so much easier. So I got a pick here with some Siliglide on it, and I'm going to go around where that plastic piece goes into the valve cover on this intake pipe. This will just help remove that tension and less likely to break that little piece, the little plastic piece that's on the intake pipe. So I got my charge pipe all loosened up right here, ready to come out, but we're going to have to move our AC line real quick. So it's just a 13mm nut on here. And then we got this sensor on the AC line that will disconnect, and we should be able to move these AC lines out of the way, and our charge pipe should come right out. We're going to move to our main intake hose that goes to the throttle body. So we'll just disconnect this pipe or little hose that goes onto it, and then there's this 7mm hose, and then I already loosened this bottom one right here, and this piece should just come right off. A little twist, and our main intake hose is off. Moving on to the right side of the air distribution pipes, disconnect our purge valve hoses. And these clips you just kind of spread out and just push back. They're pretty simple to remove, and then we can remove our vacuum hose. And then this hose. And let's get our little tool here and disconnect it from the air box. And I kind of just set this to the side here, disconnect it from the brake booster, and I just set it over there. Once we have all that vacuum and purge hoses disconnected, we can disconnect this bypass hose. This one's just, it's a twist and pull, and this comes off pretty easily. Double check that the O-rings in here are good. They look good to me. Alright, once we got our turbo side hose just loosened up, there is one more pipe that is on the supply side. So let's go ahead and remove this one for the PCV system. That's off, and then now, again, my trick is to grab a pick with some Siliglide and really work this edge. and it should just come right out. And then we'll give it a little twist, and our supply hose is off. Our charge side's out too. Now we got all of our air pipes, charge pipes, intake pipes all removed from the vehicle. I like to just get rags and just kind of stuff them in where those pipes went, just so there's no debris going into the turbo or anything like that, no coolant. So it's just make sure nothing unwanted goes in there. So let's remove all of our coolant hoses, or at least push them to the side. So let's work on our top radiator hose. Grab some pliers, and then let's go ahead and disconnect our trans lines, cooler supply lines out, return line. Then again, I like always using a pick with some lube on it just to break the seal. So we got our bottom transcooler supply and return coolant lines removed, and then we go ahead and disconnect our top radiator hose, and this should come off. All right, so this is like a big Jenga puzzle. So we're going to move our AC lines kind of out of the way, and you can remove it from right here, but these quick disconnects or whatever they are, man, they're a pain to disconnect. They really are. They're not quick at all. I usually remove the bottom two lines, and I set these two lines to the left over here, and then I disconnect this thermostat hose that goes all the way over here to the other side of the block. So let's disconnect it from here, and at the bottom of this thermostat, kind of foot dangle the hoses over here, and then tuck everything over here, so we don't have to disconnect all these connections. Now we can kind of guide these lines over here past our AC lines. And then we have our auxiliary pump right here, which is 3 10 mils. So let's go ahead and disconnect that. And then we got some clips on the heater core hoses that seem to be already removed. And now this hot mess right here can move to the side. Cool, we got most of the coolant hoses still connected. They're pretty pliable, you can bend them, they're rubber hoses. And so just to get them out of the way as much as possible to the left side, and that should give you enough room to, you know, remove everything, kind of move the AC line out of the way. Now all we have to remove is our oil cooler lines, coolant lines, and then our lower radiator hose. And our lower radiator hose is off. So now let's work on top of our engine by removing this engine cover. So there's just two 10 mil nuts right here, and then you remove the oil cap, and then this piece should come right out, and we got access to our engine. So let's remove our PCV hose that's connected to the intake, and then remove our purge valve hoses, and then we'll set this to the side. Or remove this PCV sensor, and then we can remove the hose, and we'll set this over here. Gonna disconnect the intake harness from the intake, push that to the side, and then disconnect this sensor back here, and then we're ready to remove our intake after we disconnect our throttle body connector. And this should come right up. The intake's off. This is where that little harness clips into the back of the intake. So we'll set this to the side and move on to the next step. So I like to now work on the harness part of the engine by disconnecting all these connectors. Now that we got most of this left side harness disconnected and the turbo wastegate control connected, we can just push this to the side and out of our way. And then we can work on this right side. We got our harness on our right side valve cover pushed to the side and out of our way. Now we're ready to remove both valve covers. I'm going to work on this left side first because it's the most difficult because it has this high pressure fuel pump. So let's get started on that. Alright, to remove this high pressure fuel pump, I'll get a rag and a 17mm wrench, and I'll cover it up and then loosen it, the line, and then fuel pressure would be released and we'll be ready to disconnect all the other lines. And then there's another 17mm nut way back here that is very difficult to get to. Then once that's loosened, it's the same as this one. It's just on the very back of this fuel rail. And then you got two 8mm bolts holding this line, and you got one right here, and then you got one on the back side of this head. So let's go ahead and remove those two bolts. That is the little bolt that's on the back side of that line. This is the longer bolt, and this line should come right out. And then you just use a 3/8 fuel line disconnect to disconnect these lines. And then there's these little clips that hold that fuel line in. I already disconnected most of them, besides this one back here. And this line can be put to the side. Now you just need a T45, Torx 45, and just loosening these bolts on each side slowly to release the spring tension. That one's removed. This one's removed. Now this high pressure fuel pump should come right out. And then I'll set this to the side over here, and then I also remove this bucket that's inside. So I'll just place this right next to my fuel pump. And this will go right over here. Now we're getting ready to remove our valve cover, but first we got to remove our coil packs. And this is an optional step. It's not a must. I personally mark my coil packs because these coil packs are very, very finicky, for sure. And just to stay consistent, just in case anything goes wrong, I can pinpoint it really fast. So 5, 6. and 6. Now let's remove all of our 10mm valve cover bolts. Now I like using a flathead and my little prying tool. This thing I use all the time for everything. It's pretty dull and doesn't scratch up any of the surfaces, so I get in here and really pry. And that one's loose. Let's go ahead and just remove the valve covers. And I always like to put rags in the valve cover ports. I mean, not valve cover ports, the intake ports, just so nothing goes in there.